Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's right that the public's elected representatives are trying to figure out what happened and the lessons to be learned. I hope you'll get all the senior people involved in here to speak to you about it. The truth is that senior ministers, senior officials, senior advisors like me fell disastrously short of the standards that the public has a right to expect of its government in a crisis like this. When the public needed us most, the government failed. And I'd like to say to all the families of those who died unnecessarily, how sorry I am for the mistakes that were made and for my own mistakes at that. Like in much of the government system, there were many brilliant people at relatively junior and middle levels who were terribly let down by senior leadership. I think that the Secretary of State for Health should have been fired for at least 15, 20 things, including lying to everybody in multiple occasions, in meeting after meeting in the Cabinet room and publicly. So everything to do with COBRA that day on COVID was completely disrupted because you had these two parallel sets of meetings. You had the national security people running in and out talking about, are we going to bomb the Middle East? And we had the COBRA meeting being delayed and whatnot as we were trying to figure out, are we going to do household quarantine? And then to add to it sounds so surreal it couldn't possibly be true, that day the Times had run a huge story about the Prime Minister and his girlfriend and their dog. And the Prime Minister's girlfriend was going completely crackers about this story and demanding that the press office deal with that. So we had this sort of completely insane situation in which part of the building was saying, are we going to bomb Iraq? Part of the building was arguing about whether or not we're going to do quarantine or not do quarantine. The Prime Minister has his girlfriend going crackers about something completely trivial. So essentially what's happening at this point is, we're thinking, what do we do on this? At this point, the second most powerful official in the country, Helen McNamara, is the Deputy Cabinet Secretary. She walked into the office while we're looking at this whiteboard. She says, I've just been talking to the official, Mark Sweeney, who is in charge of coordinating with the Department for Health. He said, quote, I've been told for years that there is a whole plan for this. There is no plan. We're in huge trouble. I've come through here Helen McNamara said, I've come through here to the Prime Minister's office to tell you all, quote, I think we are absolutely I think this country is heading for a disaster. I think we're going to kill thousands of people. I think that there's no doubt, in retrospect, that yes, it was a huge failing of mine, and I bitterly regret that I didn't kind of hit the emergency panic button earlier than I did. I think, in retrospect, there's no doubt that I was wrong not to. All I can say is that my worry was, like, my mental sort of state at the time was, on the one hand, you could sort of know from the last week of February that a whole bunch of things are wrong. It was clear in all the meetings with the PHE, everybody, that everything was going wrong. Everything we pushed, everything we probed, everything was wrong, bad, terrible. But I was incredibly frightened, I guess is the word, about the consequences of me kind of pulling a massive emergency string and saying the official plan is wrong and it's going to kill everyone and you've got to change plan. Because what if I'm wrong? It is completely crazy that I should have been in such a senior position, in my personal opinion. I'm not smart. I've not built great things in the world. It's completely crackers that someone like me should have been in there, just the same as it's crackers that Boris Johnson was in there and that the choice at the last election was Jeremy Corbyn. Alex Cooper was then basically given the job, build a team and start going around and building factories so that we can scale this whole thing up. However, the government then basically, the core of the government kind of collapsed when the Prime Minister got ill himself, because he's suddenly gone and then people are literally thinking that he might die. Everybody was screaming on quarantine, have a policy and set it out clearly and stick to it. We cannot keep changing your mind every time the Telegraph writes an editorial on the subject. Everybody agreed with me about that, regardless almost of what they thought the real policy should be. But nobody could find a way around the problem of the Prime Minister just like a shopping trolley smashing from one side of the aisle into the other. I mean, I try to explain this all the time. It seemed to me like, okay, if you're going to drive 300 miles to go back to work the next day, then pottering down the road for 30 miles and back to see how you feel after you've just come off what you thought might be your deathbed didn't seem crazy to me at the time.
Did you hear him say, let the bodies pile high in their thousands, or it's only killing 80-year-olds?
There's been a few different versions of these stories knocking around. There was a version of it in the Sunday Times, which was not accurate, but the version that the BBC reported was accurate.
And you heard that?
I heard that in the Prime Minister's study.